The marble countertop felt cool beneath my fingertips as I arranged the wine glasses. 6 months of working in Nicholas DeLuca's penthouse had taught me exactly how he preferred things. Precise, elegant, and invisible. That last part applied mostly to me. I smoothed down the black uniform dress that all household staff wore and checked my reflection in the polished surface of the refrigerator. My dark brown hair was pulled back in a neat bun, not a strand out of place. Professional, forgettable. Exactly how I needed to be in a home like this. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a building in Manhattan's financial district, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the city that still took my breath away even after half a year. Everything here whispered wealth. The Italian leather furniture, the original artwork that I was too afraid to Google the value of, the sound system that probably cost more than I'd make in 5 years. Miss Mitchell, Marco, the head of household security, appeared in the kitchen doorway. He was a solid wall of a man in his 40s, always polite, but with eyes that never stopped assessing. Mr. DeLuca will have 6 guests tonight. Service starts at 8. Understood. I glanced at the clock. 2 hours to prepare. Marco hesitated, which was unusual for him. These are important guests. Stay professional, stay quiet. Something in his tone made my stomach tighten, but I simply nodded. In 6 months, I'd learned that Nicholas DeLuca didn't entertain often, and when he did, the atmosphere in the penthouse changed. The security doubled. The staff moved even more carefully than usual. I wasn't naive about what Nicholas did for a living. You didn't maintain this level of wealth and power in New York without connections that existed in shadows. But I'd also learned that asking questions was the fastest way to lose a job that paid 3 times what I'd made anywhere else. By 7:30, the dining room looked impeccable. I'd set the table with the black china Nicholas preferred for business dinners, each piece positioned with geometric precision. The wine I'd been instructed to serve was a vintage I couldn't pronounce, each bottle probably worth more than my monthly rent. The guests began arriving just before 8. I stood near the kitchen entrance, hands clasped in front of me, eyes down. 3 men in dark suits entered first, their conversation stopping abruptly when they crossed the threshold. They moved with the controlled awareness of people accustomed to danger. Then Nicholas appeared from his study, and as always, my traitorous heart skipped. He was 32, though he carried himself with the authority of someone much older. Tonight he wore a charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, his dark hair perfectly styled, his brown eyes sharp as they swept the room. He was handsome in a way that felt almost dangerous, all clean lines and controlled power. I'd spent 6 months trying not to notice these details, trying not to notice the way his jaw tightened when he was thinking, or how his rare smiles transformed his entire face. Trying not to notice him at all. "Gentlemen," Nicholas said, his voice carrying that particular blend of warmth and warning that made people instinctively respect him. "Thank you for coming." The final 2 guests arrived together, and the air in the room shifted. The first was an older man with silver hair and calculating eyes. The second was younger, perhaps 40, with the polished appearance of European wealth. His suit was impeccable, his cologne expensive enough that I could smell it from across the room. "Roberto," Nicholas said, extending his hand to the younger man. "Good to see you." "Nicholas." Roberto Ferraro's accent was distinctly Italian, his smile pleasant, but his eyes cold as they scanned the penthouse. "You have exquisite taste as always." I moved forward to take coats and offer drinks, keeping my movements efficient and my gaze neutral. This was the dance I'd perfected. Present enough to serve, invisible enough to be forgotten. "What can I get you to drink?" I asked the group, my voice professionally modulated. The orders came in a blur. Scotch, bourbon, 1 request for sparkling water. I moved to the bar cart to prepare them, acutely aware of the eyes tracking my movements. Nicholas positioned himself near the windows, and I noticed how he'd placed himself where he could see both entrances to the room. As I served the drinks, Roberto's gaze lingered on me a fraction too long. I felt it like a physical touch, assessing and proprietary in a way that made my skin crawl. But I kept my expression neutral, my movements smooth. "Shall we sit?" Nicholas gestured to the dining table. I retreated to the kitchen to bring out the first course, giving the chef's team space to work. Through the swinging door, I could hear the low murmur of conversation, the occasional laugh, business talk, territory negotiations, the verbal chess game of powerful men. When I returned with plates of seared scallops arranged like artwork, the conversation paused. I served from the left, exactly as I'd been trained, starting with the guests and ending with Nicholas. His fingers brushed mine as I set his plate down, the briefest contact that sent an unwelcome jolt through me. I stepped back against the wall, hands clasped, ready to refill wine or clear plates. This was my role. Attentive but unobtrusive, present but not really there. The conversation resumed, shifting between English and what I assumed was Italian. I kept my expression blank, my posture perfect, even as I understood every word of the Italian portions. My grandmother, Nonna Lucia, had raised me speaking both languages after my parents died when I was 7. She'd insisted I stay connected to our heritage, teaching me not just the language but the regional dialect of Naples where she'd been born. It had been 2 years since Nonna passed, and hearing Italian now felt like a knife between my ribs. "The territory south of Canal Street," one of the men was saying in English. "There's been resistance. Resistance can be managed," Nicholas replied, his tone suggesting the conversation was not up for debate. Roberto leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine. Then he switched to Italian, his words casual but pointed. "You always did have excellent taste in acquisitions, Nicholas. Your home is beautiful." His eyes slid to me. "And your staff. That one is quite hot. Where did you find her?" My heart stuttered. I kept my face carefully blank, but inside, alarm bells were ringing. He'd said it assuming I wouldn't understand, reducing me to an object to be appraised. The room went absolutely silent. I risked a glance up and found Nicholas staring at Roberto with an expression that made the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. When he spoke, his Italian was flawless and sharp as a blade. "She's mine." 2 words. Simple, possessive, absolute. Roberto's eyebrows rose, surprise and calculation flickering across his face. The other men exchanged glances. I stood frozen against the wall, my pulse hammering in my throat. Nicholas seemed to realize what he'd said a fraction of a second after the words left his mouth. Something flickered in his expression, too quick to read, before his mask of control slammed back into place. But the words hung in the air, impossible to take back. "I meant," Nicholas continued in English, his voice measured, "that she is an employee of this household, and we treat our staff with respect." The correction didn't erase what had been said. Roberto's smile was slow and knowing. "Of course. My apologies if I caused offense." The rest of the dinner passed in a tension so thick I could barely breathe. I served the remaining courses mechanically, hyper-aware of Nicholas's gaze tracking my movements whenever I entered the room. Roberto watched, too, but differently now, with the calculating interest of someone who'd discovered a weakness to exploit. By the time the guests finally left, sometime past midnight, my hands were shaking. I began clearing the table, desperate for something to do with the nervous energy crackling under my skin. "Leave it." I jumped, nearly dropping the stack of plates I'd gathered. Nicholas stood in the doorway to his study, jacket removed, tie loosened, looking suddenly exhausted. "The cleaning service will handle it in the morning," he continued, running a hand through his hair. "You should rest." "I don't mind," I said quietly. "It's my job." "Gabriella." The sound of my first name in his mouth stopped me cold. In 6 months, he'd never used it. Always Miss Mitchell, always maintaining that professional distance. He stepped into the dining room, and I became acutely aware of how alone we were, how the penthouse felt different without the buffer of other staff or guests. "You speak Italian," he said. It wasn't a question. I set the plates down carefully on the sideboard. "Yes. You never mentioned it. You never asked." I met his gaze directly, and it wasn't relevant to my job. His brown eyes studied me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "You understood everything Roberto said?" "Yes." "And what I said in response?" My cheeks burned. "Yes." Nicholas moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something subtle with notes of cedar and spice. "I apologize if I made you uncomfortable. That was not my intention." "You were defending me," I said quietly, even if the phrasing was possessive. Something shifted in his expression. a crack in that controlled facade. Where did you learn Italian? My grandmother raised me. She was from Naples, came to America when she was 18. After my parents died, she made sure I grew up knowing where I came from. The language, the culture, the food. My throat tightened. She passed 2 years ago. I'm sorry. And he sounded like he genuinely meant it. We stood there in the dimly lit dining room, the city glittering through the windows behind us. And for the first time in 6 months, Nicholas DeLuca looked at me like I was a person, rather than a fixture of his household. You've worked here for 6 months, he said after a moment. Yes, sir. And I never knew you spoke Italian. Never knew about your grandmother, your parents. He shook his head slightly. I should have asked. I'm not here to burden you with my history. I'm here to do a job. Is that all you are? The question came out softer than I expected. Just someone who does a job? I didn't know how to answer that. Didn't know what he wanted me to say. So I deflected. It's late. I should let you rest. Nicholas nodded slowly, but he didn't move away. Gabriella, about what happened tonight, what Roberto saw, I need you to understand that men like him, they look for leverage, weaknesses. And you think I'm a weakness? I think, he said carefully, that I reacted in a way that revealed more than I intended. And I'm concerned about what that might mean for you. The weight of his words settled over me. I'd understood the dangerous world he inhabited in abstract terms, but this felt suddenly, terrifyingly concrete. Should I be worried? I asked. No. The word was firm. Absolute. I won't let anything happen to you. I promise you that. I wanted to ask what gave him the right to make such promises, what I'd become to him in the space of one evening that would warrant such protection. But I was exhausted, overwhelmed, and still processing the way my heart had jumped when he'd said, "She's mine," in that tone that brooked no argument. "Good night, Mr. DeLuca," I said, needing distance, needing to think. Nicholas. His voice stopped me as I reached the doorway. When it's just us, you can call me Nicholas. I looked back at him, this powerful man who suddenly seemed less certain, less controlled. Good night, Nicholas. In my small room off the kitchen, I lay awake for hours, replaying every moment of the evening. The way Roberto had looked at me, the way Nicholas had responded, the realization that in 6 months of invisibility, I'd somehow been seen all along, and the terrifying, exhilarating possibility that I wasn't invisible to Nicholas DeLuca at all, that maybe I never had been. 3 days passed before the incident with the glass. I'd been cleaning the windows in Nicholas's study, using the special solution the cleaning service provided for the floor-to-ceiling panels. The afternoon sun streamed through, making the city below shimmer like something out of a dream. I didn't hear the glass picture frame crack until it was too late. My hand jerked back, but not fast enough. Blood welled from a cut across my palm, bright red against my skin. Damn it, I muttered, pressing my other hand against the wound and looking around for something to staunch the bleeding. What happened? Nicholas appeared from his bedroom, laptop in hand. His eyes went immediately to the blood dripping between my fingers. Let me see. It's fine, I said quickly. Just a small cut. I'll clean it up and... Gabriella. He set the laptop down and crossed the room in 3 strides. Let me see. He took my wrist gently, turning my hand palm up to examine the cut. His touch was surprisingly careful, almost tender, and I found myself studying his face as he studied the wound. This close, I could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the precise way he'd shaved that morning, the full curve of his lower lip. It's not deep, he said, but it needs to be cleaned and bandaged properly. Come with me. He led me to the master bathroom, a space of white marble and chrome that I'd cleaned 100 times, but never really occupied. Nicholas guided me to sit on the edge of the bathtub while he retrieved a first aid kit from beneath the sink. This will sting, he warned, before applying antiseptic to the cut. I hissed at the burn, but didn't pull away. Nicholas worked with steady hands, his attention focused entirely on the task. He cleaned the wound thoroughly, applied antibiotic ointment, then wrapped my hand in gauze with surprising skill. Where did you learn to do that? I asked. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Growing up in my family, you learn to handle injuries. Not all of them can go to hospitals. It was the most he'd ever revealed about his past. and I treasured the information like a secret. There. He secured the bandage with tape. Keep it clean and dry for a few days. But he didn't let go of my hand. We sat there in the marble bathroom, afternoon light streaming through the window, my hand cradled in both of his. When I looked up, I found him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Thank you," I said softly. Nicholas's thumb brushed across my wrist, just above the bandage, and I felt that touch everywhere. "I don't want you to get hurt." The words felt heavier than they should, weighted with meaning I wasn't ready to examine. "I should get back to work," I whispered, but I didn't move. Neither did he. The week following the incident with Roberto Ferraro, I noticed Nicholas's presence in ways I hadn't before. He'd always been there, of course, but now he seemed to materialize in rooms I was cleaning at odd hours. Morning coffee in the kitchen when I arrived at 6. Afternoon breaks in the library while I dusted shelves. Late evenings in the living room when I finished my shift. At first I thought it was surveillance, that perhaps he didn't trust me after learning I understood Italian. But his demeanor suggested something else entirely. Curiosity, maybe. Or the simple desire for company he'd never allowed himself before. "Do you always work such long hours?" he asked one Tuesday morning, appearing in the kitchen doorway as I prepared his usual espresso. I glanced at the clock. 6:15. "I start at 6, finish around 3 most days." "Why?" "I saw you leaving last night at 11. Heat crept up my neck. I'd hoped no one would notice my evening departures twice a week. I had somewhere to be. Nicholas moved to the breakfast bar, settling onto one of the high-backed stools with the casual grace that seemed inherent to him. Today he wore dark slacks and a white dress shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. I tried not to notice the strength in his forearms as he accepted the espresso I slid across the marble. Somewhere? His tone was light, but his brown eyes were sharp. I debated deflecting, but something about the quiet morning intimacy made me honest. "I take classes, twice a week at the community college in Brooklyn." Interest flickered across his face. "What kind of classes?" "Accounting, technical certificate program." I busied myself wiping down the already clean counter. "I'm almost done with the coursework." "Accounting." He sipped his espresso thoughtfully. "That's ambitious. Why accounting?" I shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. "Numbers make sense. They're predictable. And there's always work for people who can manage finances properly. Have you thought about pursuing a full degree? A 4-year program?" "Eventually, when I can afford it." I rinsed my cloth in the sink, keeping my hands occupied. "The certificate will let me get better jobs, save more. Then maybe in a few years I can think about university." Nicholas set his cup down with a decisive click. "I could arrange that. There are excellent programs in the city, Columbia, NYU. I have connections with both admissions departments." My hand stilled in the water. "Mr. DeLuca." "Nicholas." "Nicholas," I corrected, turning to face him. "That's incredibly generous, but I can't accept that." His brow furrowed slightly. "Why not?" "Because I need to do this myself." I dried my hands on a towel, choosing my words carefully. "I appreciate the offer, truly. But if I let you pay my way through college, I'd always wonder if I actually earned the degree or if it was just another thing someone else gave me." For a long moment, he simply looked at me. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Not the polite half-curve I'd seen him offer business associates, but something genuine that transformed his entire face. "You're proud," he said, and it didn't sound like criticism. "I'm practical. There's a difference." "Is there?" He stood, carrying his empty cup to the sink himself, rather than leaving it for me. "I think you're both. Proud and practical. It's a good combination." He left me standing in the kitchen, my heart doing strange things in my chest, wondering what had just shifted between us. The charity event happened 3 weeks later, on a Friday evening when the penthouse transformed into something out of a magazine spread. Staff I'd never seen before materialized to set up bars and buffet stations. A string quartet positioned themselves near the windows. Women in evening gowns and men in tuxedos began arriving around 7. I'd been asked to help serve drinks, moving through the crowd with trays of champagne and carefully balanced appetizers. My uniform felt even more conspicuous than usual against the sea of designer fashion. but I kept my posture straight and my expression pleasant. "Champagne?" I offered a woman dripping in diamonds. She took a glass without looking at me, continuing her conversation about summer homes in the Hamptons. I moved on, navigating the crowd with the practiced efficiency of someone used to being invisible. Near the bar, a group of men had congregated, their laughter growing progressively louder as the evening wore on. I recognized the signs of too much alcohol in too short a time, and made a mental note to give them a wide berth. But avoidance only worked so long. When one of them flagged me down for a refill, I approached with professional courtesy. "Bourbon, please," he said, his words slightly slurred. "Of course." I poured 2 fingers into a crystal tumbler. As I handed it to him, his fingers closed over mine, holding on longer than necessary. "You're new. I'd remember a face like yours." I extracted my hand smoothly, stepping back. "I work for Mr. DeLuca. Can I get you anything else? How about your number?" His friends laughed, encouraging him. "I'm afraid that's not on the menu." I kept my tone light, non-confrontational. "Please excuse me." I turned to leave, but he caught my wrist, his grip tight enough to hurt. "Come on, sweetheart. Don't be like that." "Sir, I need you to let go." I kept my voice level despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. "Just one dance. What's the harm?" I could feel eyes turning toward us, the conversation around us quieting. This was exactly the kind of scene I'd been trained to avoid. Making a fuss would only draw more attention, potentially embarrass Nicholas in front of his guests. So I did what I'd learned to do in situations like this. I smiled, gently but firmly pulled my wrist free, and redirected. "I'm sure one of the other guests would love to dance with you. Let me find someone from the catering company to help you." I walked away quickly, disappearing into the kitchen before he could follow. My wrist throbbed where he'd grabbed me, and I could already see the red marks forming. "You okay?" Marco appeared beside me, his expression concerned. "Fine, just a handsy guest." I rubbed my wrist absently. Marco's jaw tightened. "Which one?" "The loud one by the bar in the blue tie." "But it's handled. I don't want to make a scene." "Mr. DeLuca will want to know." "Marco, please. It's nothing I haven't dealt with before." I picked up a fresh tray of canapes. "Let's just get through the night." But when I returned to the main room, the man in the blue tie was gone. So were his friends. And Nicholas stood near the bar, speaking quietly to Marco, his expression darker than I'd ever seen it. Our eyes met across the room. He gave a slight nod, a silent question. I nodded back, indicating I was all right. Something in his posture relaxed fractionally, but the steel remained in his gaze. I didn't see the man in the blue tie again that night, or ever again at any event in Nicholas's penthouse. The following Monday, I arrived for my shift to find the atmosphere changed. More security personnel than usual moved through the penthouse, their presence subtle but undeniable. Nicholas was locked in his study, his voice occasionally rising in sharp bursts of Italian through the heavy door. I went about my work, but the tension was contagious. Even the other staff members moved more quietly than usual, casting nervous glances toward the closed study door. Around noon, the door finally opened. Nicholas emerged looking exhausted, shadows under his eyes suggesting he hadn't slept. He barely seemed to register my presence as he moved toward the kitchen. I'd learned to read the signs by now. Without asking, I prepared a fresh pot of coffee and assembled a simple lunch. Prosciutto and mozzarella on crusty bread, the way I'd seen him eat it before when he thought no one was watching. "Mr. DeLuca?" I knocked softly on the study door. "I brought you something to eat. Come in." The study was a mess by Nicholas's standards. Papers spread across the desk, his laptop open to multiple windows, his jacket discarded over the back of his chair. He stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, conducting a conversation in rapid Italian that even I struggled to follow. I set the tray on a side table and turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. "No, that's unacceptable. Tell Lau..." He caught himself, switching to English. "Tell them the answer is no. The routes stay as agreed." A pause. "Because I don't care about their expansion plans. We had an agreement. Find another solution." He ended the call and tossed the phone onto the desk with more force than necessary. "Lunch is on the side table," I said quietly. "And fresh coffee." Nicholas turned, seeming to really see me for the first time. "Thank you, Gabriella. You didn't have to. You've been in here for hours. Someone needs to make sure you eat." A tired smile crossed his face. "Is that part of your job description now?" "Apparently." I moved toward the door, giving him privacy to eat. "Wait." His voice had lost its harsh edge. "How's your wrist?" "From Friday night." I glanced down at the faint bruise still visible on my skin. "It's fine. Barely noticeable. It shouldn't have happened. In my home, to someone under my employ." He moved closer, his expression troubled. "I'm sorry. You handled it. He's gone. That's more than most employers would do. Most employers don't." He stopped himself, running a hand through his hair. I should have been paying closer attention. The admission surprised me. Nicholas DeLuca didn't strike me as someone who apologized often or easily. "You can't watch everything," I said gently. "You had 100 guests to manage." "But I was watching." The words came out quiet, almost reluctant. "I saw him approach you. Saw you handle the situation. You were calm, professional, got yourself out of a difficult spot without creating a scene. Most people would have panicked or made demands. I've learned that making scenes usually makes things worse." Something shifted in his expression, a recognition of pain I hadn't meant to reveal. "Where did you learn that?" I shrugged, suddenly desperate to change the subject. "Your coffee's getting cold." He let me deflect, but the look in his eyes told me he'd filed the information away, adding it to whatever picture of me he was building. Later that week, I was dusting the bookshelves in the library when I heard Nicholas's voice rise in anger from the study. The door was closed, but his words carried. "I don't care what the triad wants. The answer is no." A pause. "Then they can consider it a declaration. I'm not moving my roots to accommodate their expansion." My hand stilled on the leather-bound volume I'd been cleaning. The triad. I didn't need to be an expert in organized crime to know that name carried weight and danger. "If they want a territorial dispute, they can have one. But they won't win." Another pause, longer this time. "Fine. Set up the meeting. But it happens on neutral ground, and I bring my own security." The call ended. Silence settled over the penthouse, heavy and ominous. I continued my work, but my mind raced. The tension of the past week suddenly made sense. The increased security, Nicholas's distraction, the late-night phone calls in Italian I'd overheard. He was in the middle of something dangerous, something that could spill over into violence. And I was here, in the center of it, dusting books and pretending I didn't understand the stakes. When I finished the library, I found Nicholas in the living room, staring out at the city with a glass of whiskey in his hand. It was barely 3 p.m. "The shelves are done," I said softly, not wanting to startle him. "Is there anything else you need?" He turned, and for a moment, I saw past the controlled facade to the man underneath. He looked tired, worried, human in a way that made my chest ache. "No, thank you, Gabriella. I should have left. Should have returned to the kitchen and finished my shift." Instead, I heard myself ask, "Are you all right?" The question seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised me. Nicholas DeLuca wasn't someone people worried about. He was the one who controlled things, who handled problems, who never showed weakness. "I'm fine," he said automatically. "You don't look fine." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Careful. That almost sounds like concern." "Maybe it is." I crossed to where he stood, maintaining a respectful distance but close enough to see the tension in his shoulders. "You don't have to tell me what's wrong. I know that's not my place. But for what it's worth, you look like you could use someone to talk to." Nicholas studied me for a long moment. "It's nothing you need to worry about. Just business complications. The dangerous kind. All my business is dangerous to some degree." He took a sip of his whiskey. "But I handle it. I always do." I nodded, accepting the non-answer. "Well, if you need anything, I'll be in the kitchen." As I turned to leave, his voice stopped me. "Gabriella, thank you for caring enough to ask." I looked back at him, silhouetted against the city skyline, and felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't just my employer anymore. This was becoming something else, something I wasn't ready to name but couldn't ignore. "Be careful," I said quietly. "Whatever you're dealing with, always." But as I returned to my work, I couldn't shake the feeling that Nicholas DeLuca's careful might not be careful enough, and that somehow, whether I wanted to be or not, I was becoming tangled in his dangerous world. That night, as I left the penthouse for my evening class, I noticed the security guard at the entrance watching me more closely than usual. And when I boarded the subway, I could have sworn I saw one of Nicholas's men boarding the same car 2 doors down. Protection or surveillance, I couldn't tell. Maybe both. Either way, the invisible walls around Nicholas DeLuca's life were becoming my walls too. And I wasn't sure whether that realization terrified me or brought a strange sense of relief. The discovery happened by accident. Or perhaps Nicholas had been paying more attention than I realized. I'd just finished my shift on a Thursday afternoon, gathering my coat and bag from the small staff closet near the kitchen, when Marco appeared with an envelope. "Your paycheck, Miss Mitchell. Mr. DeLuca wanted me to deliver it personally. Thank you." I tucked it into my bag without opening it, as I always did. What I didn't know was that Nicholas stood in the hallway just out of sight, watching as I immediately pulled out my phone and transferred funds through my banking app. Nearly the entire amount, minus what I needed for subway fare and groceries for the week. I didn't know he noticed the frequency of these transfers, always to the same hospital in Brooklyn. Didn't know he'd asked Marco to discreetly check the visitor logs, discovering I went there every Tuesday and Thursday evening after leaving the penthouse. I certainly didn't know he'd put the pieces together. A young woman who worked herself to exhaustion, who dressed in clothes that had seen better days, who never bought anything for herself, who studied accounting at night while sending every dollar she earned somewhere else. The rainy morning came 2 weeks later, in early November when the weather turned bitter and unforgiving. My alarm hadn't gone off, or maybe I'd been so exhausted I'd slept through it. Either way, I woke 20 minutes late and had to sprint to catch the bus that would get me to the subway on time. The bus broke down halfway through its route. "Engine trouble," the driver announced apologetically, asking us all to disembark and wait for the next one. In the pouring rain, with no shelter nearby. By the time I finally made it to the penthouse, I was 40 minutes late, soaked through to my skin, and shivering so hard my teeth chattered. Water dripped from my hair, my clothes, forming puddles on the pristine marble floor of the service entrance. "Miss Mitchell?" Marco's eyes widened when he saw me. "What happened?" "Bus broke down. I'm sorry I'm late. It won't happen again." I tried to move past him toward the staff changing room, but he blocked my path. "Mr. DeLuca wants to see you." Now, my stomach dropped. In 6 months, I'd never been late, never given him reason to reprimand me. And now, on a day when important meetings were scheduled, I'd failed. Nicholas was in the kitchen, surprisingly pouring himself coffee. He looked up when I entered, and his expression shifted from neutral to concerned in the space of a heartbeat. "Gabriella, what the hell happened?" "I'm sorry I'm late, Mr. DeLuca. The bus had mechanical issues and I had to wait for—" "You're shaking." He set his coffee down and crossed to me, his hand hovering near my shoulder but not quite touching. "How long have you been wet?" "About an hour. But I can still work, I just need to—" "No." The word was firm, leaving no room for argument. "You need a hot shower and dry clothes. Marco, have someone bring appropriate items from the department store. Size 6, comfortable. Sweater, pants, undergarments, everything." "Sir, I can't accept—" "You can, and you will." Nicholas's tone softened slightly. "Consider it a uniform replacement. You can't work in wet clothes, and I'm not sending you home in this weather. Go shower in the guest bathroom. Your clothes will be waiting when you're done." I wanted to argue, to insist I was fine. But another violent shiver ran through me, undermining my words before I could speak them. Nicholas's expression made it clear that arguing would be pointless anyway. The guest bathroom was larger than my entire childhood bedroom had been. All white marble and gleaming fixtures. I stood under the hot spray until feeling returned to my fingers and toes, until my skin turned pink and the shaking finally stopped. When I emerged, wrapped in the plush bathrobe hanging on the door, I found clothes laid out on the vanity counter. Soft gray cotton pants, a cream-colored sweater that looked impossibly comfortable, fresh undergarments still in their packaging, even thick socks. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that screamed wealth, just simple, quality comfort. I dressed quickly, toweling my hair as dry as I could manage and pulling it back into a damp braid. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Without my uniform, without the armor of professional distance, I looked younger, vulnerable. I found Nicholas still in the kitchen, now sitting at the breakfast bar with what looked like reports spread before him. He glanced up when I entered, and something in his expression shifted. Better? Yes. Thank you. I moved toward the cleaning supplies, ready to start my delayed work. Sit down. I turned, confused. Sir? Sit. He gestured to the stool across from him. You're not working yet. First, you're going to eat something warm. I already had breakfast. When? I hesitated. Yesterday? Nicholas's jaw tightened. Sit. Down. This time, I obeyed. He moved to the stove with surprising ease, pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. Within minutes, the kitchen filled with the scent of eggs and butter, bread toasting, coffee brewing. He set a plate before me. Scrambled eggs, perfectly golden toast, fresh fruit, then a mug of coffee, prepared exactly how I took it, though I'd never told him my preference. Eat, he said, settling back onto his stool. I picked up my fork, acutely aware of his eyes on me. The food was simple but perfect, the kind of breakfast my grandmother used to make on cold mornings when I was young. Why do you do it? Nicholas asked after I'd taken several bites. Do what? Work yourself to exhaustion. Send every dollar you earn somewhere else. Take night classes on top of a full-time job. He leaned forward slightly. I pulled your employment file. You listed no emergency contacts, no next of kin. But someone must be waiting for that money you transfer twice a month. My hand stilled on my fork. That's personal. I know. And you don't owe me an explanation. His voice was gentle, but I'd like to understand. I set my fork down. Appetite suddenly gone despite the excellent food. For a long moment, I debated deflecting, maintaining the professional wall between us. But something about sitting in his kitchen, wearing clothes he'd provided, eating food he'd cooked, made that wall seem pointless. My brother, I said quietly. He's 17. Lives with a foster family in Brooklyn. Nicholas's expression shifted. Foster family? After my grandmother died 2 years ago, I wasn't in a position to take custody. I was 25, working 2 jobs, living in a studio apartment barely big enough for one person. The old guilt rose in my throat. The state placed him with a good family. They take care of him. But he has a heart condition, congenital defect that needs monitoring and medication. The foster system covers some of it, but not everything. So you cover the rest. Someone has to. I picked up my coffee, needing something to do with my hands. He's all I have left, and I'm all he has. The accounting classes. Nicholas said slowly, You're studying so you can get better work, make more money for his treatment. Eventually, I want to petition for custody again, but that requires stability, a bigger apartment, proof I can provide. The certificate helps. A degree would help more. I met his eyes. That's why I can't accept your offer to pay for university. Every dollar I don't earn myself is a dollar I can't prove in a custody hearing. Understanding settled over his features. You're fighting for him. I'm doing what family does. Nicholas was quiet for a moment, studying me with an intensity that made my skin warm. What's his name? Tyler. He wants to be an architect someday. A small smile tugged at my lips despite everything. Draws buildings constantly, covers every surface with sketches. He's talented, and you're making sure he has the chance to pursue that dream. I'm trying. Nicholas reached across the counter, his hand covering mine briefly. The touch was warm, solid, grounding. That's not just trying, Gabriella. That's succeeding. Not many people would sacrifice everything for someone else. He's my brother. It's not a sacrifice. Yes, Nicholas said softly. It is. A noble one. We sat in silence, the intimacy of the moment wrapping around us like the steam from our coffee cups. Outside, rain continued to hammer against the windows, but inside, something had shifted between us. Can I tell you something? Nicholas asked after a while. About my family? I nodded. surprised by the offer. My father built this empire from nothing. Started with a restaurant in Little Italy, expanded into import-export, then other businesses. Some legitimate, some less so. He stared into his coffee. By the time I was old enough to understand what he really did, I was already being groomed to take over. No choice, no alternative path, just expectation. Do you resent it? Sometimes. Most of the time. He looked up at me. But it's the family business. You don't walk away from family obligations, even when they cost you everything. Even then, the parallel between us hung in the air, unspoken but acknowledged. We were both carrying weight we hadn't chosen, both sacrificing for family in our own ways. My phone buzzed in the pocket of the borrowed pants, shattering the moment. I pulled it out, my heart lurching when I saw the caller ID, Brooklyn Methodist Hospital. I need to take this, I said, already standing. Of course, I answered, moving toward the window for a semblance of privacy. Hello? Is this Gabriella Mitchell? A woman's voice, professional but urgent. Yes. Is Tyler okay? Your brother was brought to the emergency room about an hour ago. He collapsed at school. The doctors are examining him now, but you should come as soon as possible. The world tilted sideways. Is he conscious? He's stable, but we need to discuss treatment options. How soon can you get here? I'm in Manhattan. Maybe an hour on the subway. A hand took the phone from mine. Nicholas spoke into it with calm authority. This is Nicholas DeLuca. Miss Mitchell will arrive within 30 minutes. Ensure the best cardiologist on staff examines the patient immediately. I'll cover any costs not covered by insurance. Do you understand? Yes, sir. We'll be ready. He ended the call and handed my phone back. Marco is bringing the car around. We're leaving now. You don't have to. Gabriella. His voice was firm but kind. Stop arguing and let me help. I nodded mutely, terror overriding pride. Tyler, my baby brother, the only family I had left, lying in a hospital bed. Nicholas guided me toward the private elevator, his hand steady at my back. In the garage, a black sedan waited. Marco already behind the wheel. Nicholas opened the back door and I slid in, my hands shaking again, but not from cold this time. He climbed in beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched. Tell me about him. About Tyler. What? I blinked, confused by the request. Tell me about your brother. It'll help pass the time. So I did. I told him about Tyler's obsession with building blocks as a child. How he'd construct elaborate structures and knock them down just to start again. How he'd cried at our grandmother's funeral, but insisted on being strong for me. How he drew my face over and over in different architectural styles, turning my features into buildings and bridges. Nicholas listened without interrupting, his presence solid and grounding beside me. When my voice cracked talking about the last time I'd visited Tyler, just 3 days ago when he'd seemed fine, Nicholas's hand found mine and squeezed. Brooklyn Methodist Hospital rose before us, all concrete and glass and fluorescent lighting. Nicholas had the door open before the car fully stopped, guiding me through the emergency entrance with the confidence of someone who'd navigated hospitals before. Gabriella Mitchell, I told the reception desk, my voice stronger than I felt. My brother Tyler Mitchell was brought in. Yes, Miss Mitchell. Follow me, please. She led us through a maze of corridors to a private waiting area, far nicer than the standard emergency room. Nicholas's influence, I realized. The doctor will be with you shortly. Your brother is being examined now. Then we were alone. The antiseptic smell of hospital filling my nostrils, bringing back memories of my grandmother's final days. I sank into a chair, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. Nicholas sat beside me, not speaking, just present. His hand stayed in mine, warm and solid and real. Thank you, I whispered, for getting me here, for calling ahead, for everything. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. I turned to look at him, this powerful man who'd dropped everything to drive me across the city for a teenager he'd never met. You barely know me. You certainly don't know Tyler. You didn't have to do any of this. Nicholas's brown eyes held mine, something intense and unreadable in their depths. Maybe I wanted to. Did you consider that? Before I could respond, a doctor appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. I stood quickly, my heart in my throat. Miss Mitchell? I'm Dr. Roberts. Let's talk about your brother. Dr. Roberts led us to a small consultation room, his expression professionally neutral in a way that made my stomach clench. Nicholas stayed close, his presence a steady anchor as we sat. Tyler's condition has deteriorated, the doctor began without preamble. The valve defect we've been monitoring has progressed faster than anticipated. He needs surgery, and soon, within the next 2 weeks if possible. The words hit me like physical blows. Surgery. How much will it cost? With his current insurance coverage, you'd be looking at approximately $40,000 out of pocket. That includes the surgery itself, hospital stay, follow-up care, and medications. $40,000. I had maybe $3,000 in savings, if I was lucky. Even selling everything I owned wouldn't come close. Can I see him? My voice came out smaller than I intended. Of course. He's awake and asking for you. Tyler looked impossibly young in the hospital bed, his dark hair messy against the pillow, monitors beeping softly around him. His face brightened when he saw me, but I could see the fear underneath. Hey, Gabs. He used the childhood nickname he'd given me when he was 4 and couldn't pronounce Gabriella properly. Hey, kiddo. I took his hand, careful of the IV line. You scared me. Sorry, I was just in gym class and then everything got weird. His green eyes, so like our mother's, searched my face. They said I need an operation. Yeah, but it's going to be okay. We'll figure it out. It costs a lot, doesn't it? Despite being 17, Tyler had always been mature beyond his years. I heard the doctors talking. Don't worry about that. Just focus on getting better. Tyler's gaze shifted past me to where Nicholas stood near the door, giving us space. Who's that? That's my boss, Nicholas DeLuca. He drove me here. Nicholas stepped forward, extending his hand. Tyler, good to meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances. They shook hands, and I watched Tyler assess Nicholas with the same careful observation I'd noticed in our grandmother. Reading people, measuring their sincerity. Thanks for bringing my sister, Tyler said. She worries about me too much. Someone should worry about you, Nicholas replied with a small smile. She tells me you want to be an architect. Tyler's eyes widened. She told you that? She's proud of you. Mentioned your drawings. A faint blush colored Tyler's cheeks. They're not that good. I'd like to see them sometime, if you'd share. I watched this exchange, my heart doing strange things. Nicholas DeLuca, who commanded rooms full of dangerous men, was speaking to my teenage brother with genuine interest and respect. A nurse appeared to check Tyler's vitals, and Nicholas gestured for me to step into the hallway with him. I need to make some calls, he said once we were alone. Wait here. I'll be back shortly. He disappeared down the corridor, phone already to his ear. I returned to Tyler's room, holding his hand while he drifted in and out of sleep, the exhaustion of the day finally catching up to him. Nicholas returned 40 minutes later. Can we talk outside? In the hallway? He guided me to the same consultation room we'd been in earlier. The surgery is scheduled for next Friday. Dr. Roberts will perform it himself. He's one of the best cardiac surgeons in the state. Nicholas, I can't afford. It's handled. I stared at him. What do you mean it's handled? The hospital administration has been informed that all costs related to Tyler's surgery and recovery are covered. The full amount. The world tilted. That's $40,000. I'm aware. You can't just... My voice cracked. That's too much. I can't accept that. Nicholas's expression softened. Yes, you can. And you will. Because Tyler needs this surgery and you don't have time to figure out alternative financing. Tears burned behind my eyes. Why would you do this? You don't even know him. But I know you. He stepped closer, his voice gentle. I know you'd work yourself into the ground trying to save him. I know you'd sacrifice anything and everything. And I know that I have the means to help, so why wouldn't I? I'll pay you back. Every cent. It might take years, but I promise. Gabriella, stop. His hands came up to frame my face, thumbs brushing away tears I hadn't realized were falling. This isn't a loan. It's not a transaction. I'm doing this because I want to. Because the thought of you carrying this burden alone when I can help makes me physically ill. But I barely know you. Do you really believe that? His brown eyes held mine, intense and searching. After 6 months of existing in the same space, after all the conversations, all the moments, you know me better than people I've known for years. He was right. Somehow, in the quiet intimacy of early morning coffees and late-night conversations, in the way he'd learned how I took my coffee and I'd learned when he needed silence versus company, we'd built something real. Thank you, I whispered, fresh tears streaming down my face. Thank you so much. I don't know how to... Nicholas pulled me into his arms and I let myself break, sobbing against his chest while he held me steady. His hand stroked my hair, his voice murmuring soothing words I couldn't quite make out over my own crying. When I finally pulled back, mortified by the wet spot I'd left on his expensive shirt, he just smiled and handed me a handkerchief. Better? Yes. Sorry about your shirt. I have others. He checked his watch. It's almost 7. Have you eaten anything since breakfast? I shook my head. Come on, let's get you some real food. We found a diner 3 blocks from the hospital, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that came in endless refills. It was so far removed from Nicholas's usual world that I almost laughed. What? He asked, sliding into the booth across from me. This doesn't seem like your kind of place. You'd be surprised. I grew up eating at places like this. He picked up the laminated menu. My father believed in staying connected to regular people. Said it kept you humble. A tired waitress took our orders. Burger and fries for me, the same for Nicholas. When the food arrived, we ate in comfortable silence, the kind that felt natural rather than awkward. Tell me more about Tyler, Nicholas said eventually. What's he like when he's not in a hospital bed? So I did. I told him about Tyler's dry sense of humor, how he could make me laugh even on my worst days, about his obsession with famous architects and his dream of designing buildings that would last centuries, about how he'd taken care of our grandmother in her final months, reading to her when her eyes got too weak, making her laugh when the pain got bad. He sounds remarkable, Nicholas said. He is. He deserves a future. A real one. Not cut short because his heart doesn't work right. He'll have one. I promise you that. We returned to the hospital to say goodnight to Tyler, who was sleeping peacefully. The foster family had been notified and would visit in the morning. Nicholas offered to drive me home, but I declined. I'm taking the subway. It's faster this time of night. Gabriella, it's after 9. I'm not letting you take the subway alone. I do it all the time. Not tonight. Marco can drive us both. Too exhausted to argue, I agreed. The car ride back to Manhattan was quiet, my head resting against the window, watching the city lights blur past. When we pulled up to my building in Queens, a modest walk-up in a neighborhood that was safe but far from glamorous, Nicholas insisted on walking me to my door. 3rd floor, I said, leading him up the narrow stairwell. My apartment was tiny, barely 300 square feet, with a kitchenette, a bathroom, and a main room that served as bedroom and living area. I'd kept it clean and organized, but there was no hiding how small and sparse it was. Nicholas didn't comment on the size or the worn furniture or the cracks in the ceiling. He simply said, "It's nice. Very you. You mean small and cramped?" "I mean efficient and carefully maintained. You make the most of what you have." I set my bag down, suddenly aware of how intimate it felt having him in my personal space. "Thank you again. For everything today. I don't know how I'll ever..." "You already thanked me. Multiple times. You don't need to keep doing it. But I want you to understand how much it means." Nicholas moved closer, his expression serious. "I understand, Gabriella. What you need to understand is that I didn't do it expecting anything in return. I did it because the thought of you struggling alone, of Tyler not getting the care he needs, was unacceptable to me." "Why?" The question came out as barely a whisper. "Because I care about you, more than I probably should, given our circumstances." The admission hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I should have stepped back, should have maintained professional distance. Instead, I found myself moving closer, our circumstances being that you're my employer, among other things. His hand came up to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, the gesture achingly gentle. I won't push you, Gabriella. You've been through enough today. But I need you to know that what's happening between us, it's real for me. And it's terrifying. For me too, I admitted. He smiled. Something warm and genuine that transformed his usually guarded expression. Good. At least we're terrified together. He left, after making me promise to call if I needed anything, and I was alone in my tiny apartment with thoughts too large to contain. Nicholas DeLuca cared about me, had paid $40,000 for my brother's surgery without hesitation, had held me while I cried and bought me dinner, and walked me to my door like we were normal people on a normal date. Nothing about this was normal. But somehow, it felt more real than anything I'd experienced in years. The next week passed in a blur. I worked my shifts at the penthouse, visited Tyler every evening, and somehow found time for my classes. Nicholas seemed to appear whenever I needed something, whether it was a ride to the hospital or a simple conversation to distract me from worry. One evening, I was cleaning the library when I found him still working at 10 o'clock, hunched over his laptop with papers scattered across the desk. "You're here late," I said from the doorway. He looked up, surprise flickering across his features. "I thought you'd left hours ago. Tyler's foster family is visiting tonight. They asked for some time alone with him." I stepped into the library. "Have you eaten dinner?" Nicholas glanced at his watch, as if only just realizing the time. "I forgot. Nicholas." I shook my head. "You can't work like this without taking care of yourself. I have a meeting tomorrow with some difficult people. Need to be prepared. You won't be prepared if you collapse from hunger." I made a decision. "Give me 15 minutes. In the kitchen, I made 2 simple sandwiches from the provisions I'd been keeping stocked, turkey and provolone with the good bread Nicholas preferred, and brewed a fresh pot of tea. When I returned to the library with the tray, he'd pushed his work aside and was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You didn't have to do this," he said as I set the tray down. "Someone needs to make sure you eat. Apparently that's my job now." I handed him a plate and settled into the chair across from his desk. We ate in comfortable silence, the kind that felt earned rather than forced. When he finished, Nicholas leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why are you still here?" "It's after 10. You finished your shift hours ago." I shrugged. Didn't feel like going home to an empty apartment. "And I thought you might need company." Something shifted in his expression, vulnerability showing through the cracks in his usual control. "I did. I do." He paused. "Thank you for noticing. You notice things about me all the time. Figured I should return the favor." "What have you noticed?" The question felt weighted. Important, somehow. I chose my words carefully. "I've noticed that you work too hard. That you carry everything alone because you think that's what strength looks like. That you pretend food doesn't matter, but you have strong preferences about how things are prepared. That you're kinder than you let most people see." Nicholas was quiet for a long moment. No one's ever said anything like that to me before. Then no one's been paying attention. We talked until almost midnight, about nothing and everything. Books we'd read, places we'd traveled or wanted to travel, childhood memories both good and painful. It was the kind of conversation that built bridges, that created intimacy beyond physical attraction. When I finally left, Nicholas walked me to the elevator, his hand lingering on my shoulder. "Gabriella, be careful going home." "I always am." "I know, but be extra careful." Something in his tone made me pause. "Some people have been asking questions about you." "About us." My stomach tightened. "What kind of people?" "The kind I don't want anywhere near you." His jaw was tight. "I am increasing security. You'll notice some of my men around more often. Don't be alarmed. They're there to keep you safe." "Safe from what?" Nicholas's brown eyes were dark with concern. "From the consequences of my world touching yours. From people who might try to use you to get to me." The reality of his life, his business, his dangerous connections crashed over me. "Because of what you said to Roberto. That night at dinner." "Yes, that opened a door I can't close now." He squeezed my shoulder gently. "But I won't let anyone hurt you. I promise you that. I should have been terrified. Should have run from this complication, this danger I hadn't asked for. Instead, I found myself asking, what happens now? Now we're careful. Now you let my men keep you safe. And now I deal with the people who think they can threaten what's mine. There it was again. That possessive word that should have bothered me but somehow didn't. Because standing in Nicholas DeLuca's penthouse at midnight, seeing the concern and determination in his eyes, I realized that maybe being his wasn't a cage at all. Maybe it was the safest place I could be. Tyler's surgery was scheduled for the following Friday, which gave me a week of restless nights and anxious days. But something else was happening too. Something I couldn't ignore no matter how much I wanted to focus solely on my brother's recovery. The security around me had intensified in ways both obvious and subtle. When I left the penthouse for my evening visit to the hospital, I'd see Marco's men stationed near the elevator. On the subway platform, I'd catch glimpses of familiar faces from Nicholas's security detail, always 2 cars away but never out of sight. Outside my apartment building in Queens, a black sedan would be parked across the street, engine running, someone always inside. At first, I told myself I was imagining it, paranoia brought on by stress about Tyler's condition. But by the 3rd day, I couldn't deny the pattern anymore. I found Nicholas in his study late Thursday afternoon, speaking quietly on the phone in Italian. When he saw me in the doorway, he ended the call quickly. "Gabriella, I thought you'd left for the hospital already. I wanted to talk to you first." I closed the door behind me, needing privacy for this conversation. About the men following me. His expression didn't change, which was answer enough. "You noticed. Kind of hard not to when they're everywhere I go." I crossed my arms, suddenly defensive. "What's going on, Nicholas? And please don't tell me it's nothing." He set his phone down and stood, moving around the desk to lean against it. "Do you remember what I said about people asking questions? About consequences?" "Yes. The situation has escalated. Roberto Ferraro has been making inquiries about you through various channels. Where you live, where you go, who you see." His jaw tightened. "He's testing boundaries. Seeing if I'll react." My stomach dropped. "Testing boundaries how?" "By demonstrating that he can reach you if he wants to. That my protection isn't absolute." Nicholas ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "It's a power play. He wants me to know that anything I care about is vulnerable." The clinical way he explained it didn't match the fear coursing through me. So what does that mean for me? Am I in actual danger? Not if I can help it. That's why the security detail. He moved closer, his voice softening. "I won't let anything happen to you, Gabriella. But I need you to be smart about this. No taking different routes home. No going places alone. No deviating from your normal routine without telling Marco first." The rules felt suffocating, even as I understood their necessity. "This is because of what you said that night. Because you claimed me in front of him." "Yes, and I don't regret it." His brown eyes held mine, fierce and certain. "But I do regret that it put you at risk. I should have been angry. Should have blamed him for dragging me into his dangerous world. Instead, I found myself asking, what do we do now?" Nicholas seemed surprised by the question, or maybe by the "we" in it. "I have a proposal, but I need you to hear me out before you decide." "Okay. Move into the penthouse. Temporarily." He held up a hand when I started to protest. "Not as an employee. There's a guest suite in the private wing, completely separate from the main living areas. You'd have your own space, your own entrance, but you'd be protected. The building has security that rivals most government facilities." The suggestion was logical, even practical, but it also felt like crossing a line we couldn't uncross. "Nicholas, I can't just abandon my apartment and move in here." "Why not? You spend most of your time here anyway, and the rest at the hospital or in class. Your apartment in Queens is isolated, difficult to secure. Here, you'd be safe. Here, I'd be dependent on you for everything." "No." His voice was firm. "You'd be accepting protection while maintaining your independence. Keep working if you want, though you don't have to. Continue your classes. Visit Tyler every day. Nothing about your life changes except the address where you sleep." I moved to the window, looking out at the city stretching endlessly below. The penthouse had always felt like a different world, elevated and untouchable. Moving here would mean stepping fully into Nicholas's life, into his world of wealth and danger and complicated loyalties. "What about after?" I asked quietly. "When the threat passes? when Roberto moves on to other targets. Do I just move back to my tiny apartment and pretend none of this happened? Nicholas's reflection appeared in the glass beside mine. Is that what you want? To pretend this hasn't happened? I turned to face him. I don't know what I want. A week ago, you were just my employer. Now you've paid for my brother's surgery, you're protecting me from rivals, and you're asking me to move into your home. It's a lot to process. I know it is. And if you say no, I'll respect that. I'll find other ways to keep you safe. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But I'd prefer you here, where I know you're protected, where I can... He stopped, something vulnerable crossing his features. Where I can see that you're okay. The admission cost him something, I could tell. Nicholas DeLuca didn't admit to caring easily, didn't show weakness or attachment. But he was showing it now, to me. If I agree, I said slowly, I need conditions. Name them. I keep my job. I still work my normal shifts, still help with household tasks. I'm not going to live here like a guest while everyone else works around me. Agreed. I continue my classes, both the ones I'm taking now and the hospital volunteer program I started last week. His eyebrows rose slightly. You started volunteering? At Brooklyn Methodist. They have a program helping families navigate insurance and financial aid for patients with chronic conditions. I thought I could help, given my situation with Tyler. I met his gaze. That doesn't stop just because I move here. Of course not. What else? I visit Tyler every day until his surgery. After that, as often as he needs me. No restrictions on hospital visits. Gabriella, I would never... Nicholas shook his head. Yes. Obviously, yes. Anything else? I took a breath, steadying myself for the most important condition. This doesn't mean I'm yours. Not in the way Roberto interprets it. I'm not property to be claimed or protected. I'm a person making a choice to accept help from someone I trust. But I'm still me. Still independent. Still free to leave if I want to. Nicholas stepped closer, his expression serious. I would never think of you as property. What I said to Roberto was instinct, protective and possessive in a way I don't entirely understand. But it wasn't about ownership. His hand came up to cup my cheek, gentle and warm. If you move in here, it's because you choose to. And if you choose to leave, I won't stop you. Though I'll do everything I can to convince you to stay. The honesty in his voice, the vulnerability in his touch, broke through my remaining resistance. Okay. Okay? I'll move in. Temporarily. Until this situation with Roberto resolves. Relief washed over his features so completely that I realized how worried he'd been that I'd refuse. When can you be ready? I don't have much to pack. Tomorrow? I'll send Marco to help. And Gabriella? He smiled. Something warm and genuine. Thank you for trusting me. Moving happened faster than I expected. Marco and 2 other men collected my belongings from Queens the next morning, fitting everything I owned into 3 suitcases and 4 boxes. It was humbling, seeing my entire life condensed so efficiently. The guest suite Nicholas had mentioned turned out to be larger than my entire apartment had been. A bedroom with a queen bed and windows overlooking the city. A sitting area with a comfortable couch and television. A full bathroom with a soaking tub and separate shower. Even a small kitchenette with a refrigerator and microwave. This is too much, I said when Nicholas showed me around. It's what was available. Make it yours however you want. If you need anything, just ask. Tyler's surgery went well. I sat in the waiting room for 6 hours while Dr. Roberts repaired the valve defect, with Nicholas beside me the entire time, despite having meetings he could have attended. When the doctor finally emerged to say everything had gone smoothly, I'd cried with relief against Nicholas's shoulder. The recovery would take weeks, but Tyler was young and strong. The prognosis was excellent. Living in close proximity to Nicholas changed things between us in ways both subtle and profound. We'd always had our early morning coffee routine, but now it happened in his kitchen with me wearing comfortable pajamas instead of my work uniform. Conversations that used to be stolen moments became extended discussions over breakfast or late dinners after I returned from the hospital. We learned each other's rhythms. I discovered that Nicholas was cranky before his first espresso but thoughtful after his second, that he read historical biographies before bed and marked passages with a pencil he kept on his nightstand, that he hated talking on the phone but would do it for hours if the situation required. He learned that I was quietest in the mornings, needing silence to ease into the day, that I reorganized things when I was stressed, alphabetizing books or color-coding files, that I fell asleep easily but woke at the slightest noise, a habit developed from years of being responsible for Tyler. 2 weeks after moving in, on a night when Tyler had been particularly cheerful during my visit, I returned to find Nicholas in the kitchen making dinner. Actually cooking, not just reheating something the chef had prepared. "You cook?" I set my bag down, surprised. "Sometimes. When I want to think." He gestured to the stove where pasta bubbled in a pot. "Hungry?" "Starving. The hospital cafeteria is terrible." We ate together at the breakfast bar, the same place where so many of our conversations had happened. The pasta was simple but perfectly done, the sauce rich with garlic and herbs. "This is delicious," I said after several bites. "My mother's recipe. One of the few things she taught me before." He stopped, something painful flickering across his face. "Before what?" "Before she left. I was 12. He set his fork down. She couldn't handle my father's life anymore. The danger, the lies, the constant worry. One day she was just gone. I reached across to cover his hand with mine. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago." But his fingers curled around mine, holding on. "She writes sometimes. Birthday cards, Christmas. Always with a return address somewhere warm. Florida, Arizona, California. She moves a lot. Do you ever visit her?" "No. She made her choice to leave. I made mine to stay." His thumb brushed across my knuckles. "Family obligations, remember?" We sat like that, hands linked across the counter, the weight of our respective responsibilities hanging between us. Then Nicholas said quietly, "I think about you constantly." My breath caught. "What?" "Every meeting I'm in, every phone call, every decision I make. Part of my mind is always wondering where you are, if you're safe, if you've eaten, if you're happy." His brown eyes met mine, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. "It's distracting. It's dangerous given my line of work. And I don't care." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Nicholas, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know that this isn't casual for me. That you're not just someone I'm protecting, or someone who works for me." He squeezed my hand gently. "You're important. To me. In ways I'm still trying to understand." I should have been scared by the intensity of his admission. Should have pulled back, maintained distance. Instead, I found myself saying, "I feel it too. This thing between us. But I'm terrified it's just circumstance. Proximity and gratitude and the crisis with Tyler making everything feel more intense than it really is. And if it's not? If this is real? Then I'm still terrified." I met his gaze. "Because your world is dangerous, and mine is simple. And I don't know how those two things fit together without one destroying the other." Nicholas stood, moving around the counter until he was beside me. "What if we stop overthinking it? Stop trying to figure out how it works and just let it be what it is." "And what is it?" His hand came up to tuck hair behind my ear, the gesture achingly familiar now. "Something worth exploring. Something that makes me feel alive in ways I haven't in years." I stood too, closing the small distance between us. "I don't want to be just a distraction. Something that pulls your focus when you need to be sharp. You're not a distraction, Gabriella. You're the reason I want to be better. To build something beyond what my father left me." His other hand found my waist. "Let me try. Let us try." The kiss happened naturally, inevitably, like something that had been building for months and finally found release. His lips were soft against mine, questioning at first, then deepening when I responded. My hands slid up his chest to his shoulders, feeling the strength there, the controlled power that he kept so carefully leashed. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nicholas rested his forehead against mine. "Was that okay?" I laughed, giddy and relieved and more certain than I'd been about anything in months. "Yes, very okay." "Good. Because I've wanted to do that since the night you answered that phone call in Italian." We stayed like that, wrapped in each other in the kitchen where so much of our relationship had developed, and I let myself believe that maybe this impossible thing between us could work after all. Tyler's recovery progressed better than the doctors had anticipated. 2 weeks after surgery, he was cleared to go home with the foster family, under strict instructions about rest and follow-up appointments. The relief I felt watching him walk out of Brooklyn Methodist under his own power, color returned to his cheeks, was profound enough to bring tears. "Stop crying, Gabs," he said, embarrassed but smiling. "I'm fine now. I know. I'm just happy." I hugged him carefully, mindful of his healing chest. "You scared me. I know. Sorry about that." He pulled back to look at me seriously. "Thank Nicholas for me. The foster parents told me what he did, what the surgery would have cost. I owe him everything. You don't owe him anything. Just focus on getting stronger." But Tyler was right. We both owed Nicholas more than we could ever repay. Not just the money, though that was staggering, but the speed with which he'd mobilized resources, the quality of care he'd ensured, the way he'd treated my teenage brother with genuine respect, rather than condescending charity. With Tyler on the mend, I could finally focus on other aspects of my life that had been neglected during the crisis. The twice-monthly shifts I'd been picking up at the small cafe in Brooklyn, a leftover from before I'd gotten the full-time position at the penthouse, had become impossible to maintain. I'd been calling out constantly, and the owner, while sympathetic, needed reliable help. "I need to give my notice at the cafe," I told Nicholas one morning over coffee. "It's not fair to them to keep a position I can't fill." He looked up from his tablet. "You've been working 2 jobs this entire time? Just occasional shifts. A few hours twice a month when they needed extra hands during rush periods." I sipped my espresso. It was extra money for Tyler's medications. But now, with the surgery handled and him recovering, I don't need it anymore. Nicholas set his tablet down, his expression thoughtful. "The work you do here, it's more than what we initially agreed upon. You've essentially been managing the entire household staff coordination, not just cleaning. I don't mind. I like staying busy. That's not the point. The point is you're undercompensated for what you actually do." He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. "I'm increasing your salary, effective immediately. It should more than cover what you were making at the cafe. Nicholas, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do. This isn't charity, Gabriella. This is paying you what you're worth." His brown eyes were serious. "Between managing staff schedules, handling vendor relationships, and maintaining this place, you do the work of a house manager. You should be compensated accordingly." The increase he showed me on his phone made my eyes widen. It was nearly double what I'd been making, putting me in a position where I could not only cover Tyler's ongoing medical needs but actually start saving substantial money toward that custody petition. "Thank you," I said quietly. "This means more than you know." "I do know. That's why I'm doing it." That same week, the atmosphere in the penthouse shifted again. More meetings behind closed doors, more tense phone conversations in Italian that I tried not to overhear. Nicholas's jaw was constantly tight, his shoulders carrying visible tension. "What's happening?" I asked one evening after a particularly heated call. "Territory disputes, getting more complicated." He rubbed his temples. "The triad is pushing from the east. Roberto's people are testing boundaries from the south. It's a coordinated pressure campaign." "What does that mean for you?" "It means I need to go to Chicago. There's a commission meeting, all the major families. We need to establish clear boundaries before this escalates into something worse." My stomach tightened. "How long will you be gone?" 4 days, maybe 5. He moved closer, his hand finding mine. "I don't want to leave you. But this can't be handled remotely. I'll be fine. I have Tyler to visit, my classes, and I started helping with that volunteer program at the hospital, the one assisting families with insurance paperwork and financial aid applications." Interest flickered in his eyes. "When did you start that?" "Last week. The hospital administrator mentioned they needed volunteers who understood the system, who'd been through it themselves." I shrugged. I thought I could help other people navigate what I just went through. "That's remarkable." His thumb brushed across my knuckles. "Most people who've been through trauma want nothing to do with it afterward. You're turning it into something positive. I had help getting through it. Not everyone does. If I can make the process less terrifying for even one family, it's worth a few hours a week." Nicholas pulled me closer, his arms wrapping around me. "You constantly surprise me, you know that? Good surprises? The best kind. He left for Chicago on a Tuesday morning after extracting promises that I'd check in with Marco daily and wouldn't deviate from my established routine. The penthouse felt different without him, larger and emptier despite the presence of household staff. I threw myself into structure. Morning shift managing household operations, afternoon classes at the community college where I was finishing my last 2 certificate requirements, early evening visits to Tyler, who was recovering remarkably well, late evening volunteer hours at Brooklyn Methodist helping families navigate the labyrinth of medical billing and insurance claims. The routine helped, kept me from thinking too much about Nicholas in Chicago dealing with dangerous people, from worrying about the territorial disputes he'd mentioned, from missing him with an intensity that surprised me. Thursday afternoon, I was leaving the hospital after a volunteer shift when a man approached me in the parking garage. He was in his 40s, expensively dressed, with the polished appearance of a businessman. Nothing overtly threatening about him except the deliberate way he positioned himself between me and my path to the exit. Miss Mitchell? Gabriella Mitchell? Every instinct I'd developed living in Nicholas's world screamed warning. Can I help you? I hope so. I represent some business associates who'd like to have a conversation with you. His smile was professional, practiced. Nothing dramatic, just a brief chat about your employer. I'm not interested. I moved to step around him, but he shifted to block me again. Hear me out before you decide. We're prepared to offer substantial compensation for very simple information. Mr. DeLuca's schedule, his travel plans, who he meets with. Basic details that wouldn't compromise anyone's safety. My heart hammered, but I kept my voice steady. Who do you work for? Does it matter? The offer stands regardless. $50,000 for a few simple details. Think about what that could do for your brother's future. The mention of Tyler sent ice through my veins. They'd researched me thoroughly enough to know my vulnerability. My answer is no. Now please move. Be smart about this, Miss Mitchell. People who cooperate with us are protected. People who don't. He let the threat hang unfinished. Without appearing to, I'd been recording on my phone since he first mentioned compensation. Years of being careful, of documenting things for my own protection, had made the action instinctive. Now I made sure it was visible. I'm recording this conversation. You've just attempted to bribe me for information about my employer, and threatened me when I refused. I'm leaving now. If you follow me or approach me again, I'm going directly to the police. Something flickered across his face. Surprise? Maybe respect. You're making a mistake. That's my choice to make. I walked past him, forcing my legs to remain steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. In my car, hands shaking, I immediately sent the recording to the lawyer Nicholas had mentioned once, David Hartman, whose contact information Marco had provided for emergencies. Then I forwarded it to Marco with a brief explanation. The response came within minutes. Marco calling, his voice tight with concern. Where are you now? Still in the hospital parking garage. I'm fine, he didn't touch me. But I wanted you to have the recording immediately. Stay where you are. I'm sending 2 men to escort you home. Don't go anywhere alone until Mr. DeLuca returns. The security detail arrived within 10 minutes. 2 of Nicholas's most trusted men who checked the garage thoroughly before escorting me to the penthouse. The remainder of Thursday and all of Friday passed with heightened security. Armed men positioned at every entrance. The atmosphere tense with waiting. Nicholas returned Friday evening, earlier than expected. I was in the kitchen preparing tea when I heard the elevator, his voice speaking rapid Italian to someone. Then he was there, crossing the space in long strides, his hands framing my face as he searched my expression. Are you all right? Did he hurt you? I'm fine. He never touched me, just tried to bribe me. I covered his hands with mine. I recorded everything and sent it to David and Marco immediately. I know. I heard the recording. Something fierce and protective blazed in his brown eyes. You handled that perfectly. Better than most of my men would have. I was terrified. You didn't sound terrified. You sounded calm and smart and absolutely certain. His thumb brushed my cheekbone. Do you know what he was offering? $50,000. Most people would have at least pretended to consider it, bought themselves time to think. You refused immediately. Of course I did. I'm not going to betray you for money. Why not? The question was genuine, curious. I'm not your family. We've known each other a few months. $50,000 could change your life. I pulled back slightly, studying his face. Do you really not know? Know what? That you matter to me. That the thought of helping someone hurt you makes me physically ill. That I'd rather have nothing and know you're safe than have everything and know I contributed to your destruction. Nicholas was silent for a long moment, something vulnerable and overwhelmed in his expression. Then he kissed me, deep and thorough and full of things we hadn't said yet. When we finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. I've never had anyone choose me like that. Not when it cost them something. Not when the easy path was right there. Then you've been surrounded by the wrong people. He laughed, the sound rough with emotion. Apparently. We moved to the living room, where Nicholas explained what the recording had revealed. The man was a known intermediary for Roberto Ferraro, confirming that the approach had been coordinated from the top. The fact that I'd recorded everything and reported it immediately had given Nicholas leverage, proof of Roberto's boundary violations that could be used with the commission. This actually helps, Nicholas said, laptop open on the coffee table showing messages from his Chicago meetings. Roberto's been claiming he respects the established protocols. This proves otherwise. So what happens now? Now I use this to force a formal mediation. He was right. In the weeks that followed, Chicago stopped being an abstract threat and turned into conference rooms, closed doors, and too many cups of coffee. The commission listened to the recording not as gossip, but as evidence. By the time they were finished, Roberto had been pushed back from several of the borders he'd been pressing, and the triad had formal constraints written into the new agreements. It wasn't peace, and it didn't magically turn Nicholas into a saint, but it redrew the map in a way that gave us room to breathe. Everyone watching understood that if they wanted to come for the pieces of the city tied to our foundation, they'd have to do it in the open, not through back corridors and parking garage threats. Roberto can't play innocent when there's documented evidence of him attempting to compromise my household security. He closed the laptop. It'll take time to resolve completely, but the immediate threat should decrease. Should? Nothing's certain in my world, Gabriella. You know that now. He pulled me closer on the couch. But I can promise you this. Anyone who comes near you again will regret it. The possessive protectiveness should have bothered me, should have felt like another cage. Instead, it felt like safety, like someone finally standing between me and the dangers I'd always faced alone. I need to tell you something, I said quietly, about why I wasn't even tempted by the money. You don't have to explain. I want to. I took his hand, lacing our fingers together. When I was with my last boyfriend, before I came to New York, he used to test me like that. Offer me things, money or gifts, or help with Tyler, but always with strings attached. Always with the understanding that I owed him something in return. By the time I realized what was happening, I was so tangled up in debt and obligation that leaving seemed impossible. Nicholas's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. I swore when I finally got out that I'd never let myself be owned like that again, that I'd rather struggle honestly than be comfortable dishonestly. I met his eyes. So when that man offered me money to betray you, it wasn't even a choice, because you've never made me feel owned. You've never used generosity as leverage. Everything you've done for Tyler, for me, has been freely given. No strings. Never strings. Nicholas agreed quietly. I don't want you obligated to me, Gabriella. I want you to choose me because you want to. I do choose you. That's what I'm trying to say. I squeezed his hand. You're a good man, Nicholas DeLuca. Even in a world that rewards being ruthless, you've tried to be decent. And that matters to me more than any amount of money ever could. He pulled me fully into his arms, holding me like I was something precious and breakable. I don't deserve you. Maybe not. But you have me anyway. We stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other on the couch, the city lights twinkling through the windows. Whatever came next with Roberto, with the territorial disputes, with the dangerous complexity of Nicholas's world, we'd face it together. Not as employer and employee, not as protector and protected, as partners, as equals, as two people who'd chosen each other despite every logical reason not to. And somehow, that felt like the strongest protection of all. 6 months after that first kiss in the kitchen, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. Tyler was thriving, his energy returned, his color healthy. The volunteer program at Brooklyn Methodist had expanded with me coordinating 3 other volunteers now. And my accounting certificate was finally complete. I stared at the final grade report on my laptop screen, hardly believing the numbers. Straight A's across all courses. The technical certificate was mine, officially, after 2 years of night classes and exhaustion and doubt. Congratulations. Nicholas's voice came from the doorway of my suite, where I'd been working at the small desk. I turned, smiling. How did you know? Marco mentioned you'd been checking your email obsessively all morning. He stepped inside, hands in his pockets, looking relaxed in dark slacks and a white button-down with sleeves rolled to his elbows. The grades posted? Just now. I passed everything. Top marks. The reality of it hit me fresh, bringing unexpected tears. I actually did it. Nicholas crossed to me, pulling me up from the chair and into his arms. Of course you did. You're brilliant and determined. I never doubted it for a second. I doubted it plenty of times. I know. But you kept going anyway. That's what makes you extraordinary. He pulled back slightly, his brown eyes warm. We're celebrating. Tonight. No arguments. Nicholas, you don't have to make a big deal. It is a big deal. You worked for this while managing everything else in your life. That deserves recognition. His smile turned slightly mischievous. Besides, I already made plans. 8 o'clock on the terrace. Just us. The terrace had been transformed when I stepped out that evening. String lights crisscrossed overhead, creating a canopy of warm illumination. A small table was set for 2 with simple white linens and candles. Nothing ostentatious but undeniably romantic. The city sprawled below us, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. This is beautiful, I said, taking in the scene. Nicholas pulled out my chair, waiting until I was seated before taking his own. I wanted tonight to be special. Just you and me, celebrating what you've accomplished. Dinner was courses of my favorite foods, things Nicholas had learned I loved over months of shared meals. Fresh pasta with sage butter, roasted vegetables, a salad with pears and candied walnuts. Wine that tasted expensive, but not showy. Everything perfect in its simplicity. Tyler started his internship this week, I said between courses. He called me yesterday, so excited he could barely get the words out. Nicholas smiled. David mentioned he's doing well. Good instincts for the administrative side of things. After Tyler's full recovery, Nicholas had offered him a part-time position in the charitable foundation he'd established years ago, doing basic administrative work that would look good on college applications while teaching real skills. Tyler had been hesitant at first, worried about accepting more help, but I'd convinced him that sometimes you accept opportunities not as charity, but as stepping stones. He wants to take some business classes at community college next semester, along with his architecture courses. Says understanding the financial side will make him a better architect eventually. Pride swelled in my chest. He's thinking ahead, planning a real future. Because you gave him that chance. You fought for it. Nicholas reached across the table, his fingers finding mine. Everything you did, all the sacrifice and struggle, it's paying off. Tyler's healthy and building a life. You have your certificate and job prospects opening up. You should be proud. I am. But I didn't do it alone. I squeezed his hand. You made it possible, Nicholas. The surgery, the stability, the time and space to focus on school. I wouldn't be here without you. You would have found a way. You always do. After dinner, Nicholas retrieved a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. My breath caught, a moment of panic about what it might contain. But when he opened it, I found a delicate necklace instead of a ring. A sapphire pendant, deep blue and luminous, set in white gold with a simple chain. This belonged to my grandmother. Nicholas said quietly, my father's mother. She was the only member of my family who ever asked me what I wanted from life, instead of telling me what I owed. He lifted the necklace from the box. She wore this every day until she died, left it to me specifically, said to give it to someone worthy, someone who understood that family means choosing to show up, not just sharing blood. Tears pricked my eyes. Nicholas, I can't accept something so meaningful. Yes, you can. Because you are worthy, Gabriella. You embody everything my grandmother valued. Strength, loyalty, the courage to fight for the people you love. He moved behind my chair, fastening the necklace around my throat. This isn't about possession or obligation. It's about family, the one we choose to build. The sapphire settled against my skin, warm from his hands. I touched it gently, feeling the weight of history and intention. Thank you. I'll treasure it. Nicholas returned to his seat, his expression softer than I'd ever seen it. There's something else I want to tell you, about changes I'm making to the business. I waited, sensing the importance of whatever came next. I've been working with my lawyers and accountants to restructure things, gradually shifting away from the operations that exist in legal gray areas toward legitimate enterprises. Real estate development, restaurant chains, import-export of legal goods. He paused. It'll take years to complete the transition, and I'll never be entirely clean given my history. But I want to build something sustainable, something that won't destroy the people I care about. What changed? I asked, though I suspected I knew. You did. Being with you, seeing how you approach problems with pragmatism instead of ruthlessness, watching you build something positive from trauma. His eyes held mine. You make me want to be better. Not perfect, but better than I was. The Foundation's annual charity gala happened 2 weeks later, a massive event held at a luxury hotel in Midtown. Nicholas had been preparing for months. This year's fundraiser benefiting pediatric cardiac care at Brooklyn Methodist and 2 other hospitals. Given Tyler's recent experience, the cause felt deeply personal. I'd insisted on helping with the logistics rather than just attending as Nicholas's guest. For weeks, I'd been working with the event coordinator, managing spreadsheets, tracking RSVPs, coordinating with vendors. It felt good to contribute something tangible beyond just being arm candy for a powerful man. The night of the gala, I wore a dress Nicholas had selected. Champagne-colored silk that draped elegantly without being ostentatious. The sapphire necklace rested against my throat, my only jewelry. Simple but sophisticated. Or so Nicholas assured me when I'd worried about fitting in. You'll be working backstage most of the night, I reminded him as we rode to the hotel. I'm not attending as your date. I'm part of the team making sure everything runs smoothly. I know, though I reserve the right to steal you away for one dance later. The event was controlled chaos. I spent the first 2 hours in the staging area behind the ballroom, managing last-minute seating changes, coordinating with catering about dietary restrictions, and ensuring the auction items were properly displayed. The event coordinator, a woman named Patricia, who'd initially been skeptical of my involvement, had come to rely on my organizational skills. Gabriella, can you handle the backstage check-in for VIP arrivals? She asked during a brief lull. I need to manage the audio issues. Of course. I positioned myself near the private entrance where the most influential guests would arrive, tablet in hand with the master list. The first hour brought a steady stream of wealthy philanthropists, business leaders, and various members of the interconnected families that made up Nicholas's world. They were polite, but dismissive at first, assuming I was just event staff. But when I knew their names without checking, when I could direct them precisely where they needed to go, when I handled a seating dispute with diplomatic firmness, their attitudes shifted. You're the young woman Nicholas has been seeing, one elderly woman said, her shrewd eyes assessing me. Maria Santoro. My husband runs operations in New Jersey. Gabriella Mitchell. It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Santoro. You're not what I expected. She studied me frankly. You're working, actually contributing instead of just draping yourself on Nicholas's arm for show. I prefer being useful. She smiled, genuine warmth breaking through her initial reserve. Good. We need more of that, and less decorative uselessness. My husband mentioned you handled an approach from Roberto's people with intelligence, recorded evidence instead of panic. News traveled fast in this world. I did what made sense. Exactly. She patted my arm. You'll do well here, girl. Just remember to keep your spine straight and your eyes open. Similar interactions repeated throughout the evening. The wives and matriarchs who actually wielded power in these families, often from behind the scenes, seemed to appreciate that I wasn't trying to impress them, that I worked instead of performing, contributed instead of consuming. By the time the formal program began, I'd earned a surprising amount of respect from people whose approval Nicholas claimed actually mattered. The gala raised over $2 million for pediatric cardiac care. Nicholas gave a brief speech about the importance of ensuring every child had access to life-saving treatment, regardless of their family's financial situation. He didn't mention Tyler specifically, but his eyes found mine in the crowd, and I knew who he was thinking about. Afterward, during the reception, Nicholas appeared at my elbow. "Dance with me. I should help Patricia with cleanup coordination. 5 minutes. Dance with me." He led me onto the floor where other couples swayed to the orchestra's music. His hand was warm at my waist, solid and grounding. "You were magnificent tonight," he said quietly. "Patricia told me you basically ran the entire backstage operation. And Maria Santoro cornered me specifically to say she approved of you. Maria's terrifying." "Exactly. Her approval means something." He pulled me slightly closer. "You fit into my world better than I do sometimes." "I don't know about that." "I do. You navigate the politics without getting absorbed by them. You maintain your integrity while being practical. It's a rare skill." We swayed together, the moment feeling suspended from time and circumstance. When the song ended, Nicholas pressed a kiss to my forehead before releasing me back to my coordination duties. The business proposition came 3 days later, delivered by one of Nicholas's senior associates during a meeting in the penthouse study. I was passing through with coffee when I heard the numbers being discussed. $12 million in the first year alone, the associate was saying. "Guaranteed income stream, minimal risk. The routes are already established." "What's being moved?" Nicholas asked. A pause. "The clients prefer we don't ask detailed questions, but given the profit margin, we can assume it's not legal goods." I hesitated in the hallway, knowing I shouldn't eavesdrop but unable to move away. "What areas would the routes cross?" "Primary corridors through Brooklyn and Queens. Some traffic through Lower Manhattan." Nicholas was quiet for a moment. "That includes neighborhoods where our foundation operates, where the hospital programs are." "Yes, but the operations would be completely separate. No connection between the charitable work and this business, except they'd be happening in the same communities, to the same people." Nicholas's voice had gone flat. "Decline the offer. Sir, with respect, this is exactly the kind of opportunity that built this organization. The profit would fund expansion into legitimate markets faster." I said decline. After the associate left, I found Nicholas standing by the study window, tension evident in his shoulders. I entered quietly, setting fresh coffee on his desk. "You heard," he said without turning. "Some of it. Enough. I'm turning it down. The profit isn't worth the cost." I moved to stand beside him at the window. "Can I show you something?" At his nod, I pulled up a spreadsheet on my tablet, one I'd been working on for the foundation's quarterly review. "These are the neighborhoods your foundation currently serves. Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, parts of Manhattan. 43,000 people directly impacted by programs last year. Food assistance, after-school programs, medical advocacy like what I do at Brooklyn Methodist." I swiped to another screen. "This is the overlap with the routes your associate mentioned. 87%. Which means whatever gets moved through those corridors, 87% of the communities you're trying to help would be the same communities dealing with whatever that trafficking brings. Violence, addiction, instability." Nicholas studied the data silently. "I'm not telling you what to do," I said carefully. "Your business, your choice. But I thought you should see the numbers. The real impact beyond profit margins." He took the tablet, scrolling through the data I'd compiled. "You put this together?" "I analyzed data for the foundation anyway. This was just connecting existing information." Nicholas set the tablet down and pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly. This is exactly why I'm trying to change things. Because you show me the cost, not just the profit. The humanity, not just the numbers. You already knew the cost. You just needed someone to confirm you weren't crazy for caring about it. Maybe." He pulled back to look at me. "I'm redirecting resources, building legitimate operations that can eventually replace the illegal income. It'll take time, but I'm committed to it now. To building something that doesn't require destroying communities to profit. That's a good legacy," I said softly. Better than what your father left. Better because of you. Because you helped me see what better looks like. We stood together at the window overlooking the city. Two people trying to build something honest from complicated origins. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't happen overnight. But we were trying. Together. And somehow that felt like its own kind of victory. 1 year had passed since that dinner party, when Nicholas had instinctively claimed me in front of Roberto Ferraro, setting everything in motion. 365 days of transformation. Of building something real from what had started as employer and employee, protector and protected. Now I stood in the private jet 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, watching clouds drift past the window, wondering what Nicholas had planned. He'd been secretive about this trip for weeks, only telling me to pack for warm weather and trust him. "We're approaching the coast," Nicholas said, appearing beside me with 2 glasses of wine. "You should see it soon." Minutes later, the Italian coastline emerged from the haze, all golden cliffs and turquoise water sparkling under late afternoon sun. My breath caught as recognition flickered through memories built from my grandmother's stories. "Is that Positano?" Nicholas confirmed. "Or close to it. The village where your grandmother was born is about 20 minutes south. Smaller, quieter, but just as beautiful, according to the records I found." Tears pricked my eyes. "You brought me to Nana's village. I thought it was time you saw where your story began." Where her story began. His hand found mine, fingers lacing together. "Before we start writing the next chapter of ours." The village was everything my grandmother had described in her stories. Narrow cobblestone streets winding up hillsides, houses painted in faded yellows and soft corals, laundry hanging between windows like colorful flags. The small church where she'd been baptized still stood at the village center, its bell tower visible from everywhere. Nicholas had arranged a guide, an elderly woman named Lucia who'd known my grandmother's family decades ago. She led us through the winding streets, pointing out landmarks with the enthusiasm of someone delighted to share her home's history. "Your grandmother, she lived there." Lucia gestured to a narrow house painted pale yellow, its shutters a weathered green. "The Russo family, they were bakers. You could smell the bread every morning throughout the whole village." I stood before the house, trying to imagine my grandmother as a young girl running through that doorway, her whole life ahead of her. "Can we go inside?" "The family who lives there now, they are away visiting relatives. But I have permission." Lucia produced a key, unlocking the heavy wooden door. The interior had been modernized, but bones of the original structure remained. Low ceilings with exposed beams, a fireplace built into the wall, windows that overlooked the sea. I moved through the room slowly, my grandmother's voice echoing in memory, describing this exact layout, these exact views. She told me about watching fishing boats from this window. I said quietly, standing where she must have stood countless times, wondering what existed beyond the horizon. Nicholas's arms wrapped around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. "And then she found out. Built a whole life in a new country. Raised you to be extraordinary." We spent the afternoon exploring. The church where Lucia showed us faded records with my great-grandparents' names written in careful script. The small square where my grandmother had described playing as a child, now home to a cafe with tables under ancient olive trees. The winding path down to the beach where she'd learned to swim. As sunset approached, Nicholas guided me to a restaurant perched on a cliff overlooking the Mediterranean. It was small and family-owned, the kind of place tourists rarely found. Our table sat on a terrace with nothing between us and the sea except air and possibility. "This is perfect," I said, watching the sun paint the water in shades of gold and coral. "Thank you for bringing me here, for making this real instead of just stories. There's a reason I wanted you to see this place." Nicholas reached across the table, taking both my hands in his. "Your grandmother left here with nothing but courage and hope. She built an entire life from that. Raised a family, created a home, gave you the foundation you needed to become who you are. She was remarkable. You're remarkable. Her legacy living and breathing and making the world better." His thumbs brushed across my knuckles, the gesture familiar and grounding. "I wanted you to stand where she stood, to see what she saw, before I asked you something important." My heart began to race as Nicholas stood, moving around the table. Then he knelt beside my chair, one hand still holding mine, the other reaching into his jacket pocket. The ring box was small and velvet, worn at the edges. When he opened it, the ring inside took my breath away. A sapphire, matching the necklace I wore, set in a band of white gold with delicate engraving along the sides. Modern, yet timeless. Elegant without being ostentatious. "Gabriella Mitchell," Nicholas said, his voice steady but his eyes bright with emotion. I don't have a speech prepared because words feel inadequate for what I want to say. But I'll try. He took a breath, his brown eyes holding mine with absolute certainty. "A year ago, I said you were mine without thinking, without understanding what I was really saying. It was instinct, protective and possessive and completely inappropriate given our relationship at the time." A small smile touched his lips. "But it was also true. Some part of me recognized you even then. Knew you were important in ways I couldn't articulate. Nicholas, let me finish." His grip on my hand tightened gently. "This past year with you has taught me what partnership actually means. Not possession, not protection offered in exchange for dependence, but two people choosing each other every single day, choosing to be better together than they could be apart." Tears were streaming down my face now, but I didn't care. "You make me want to build something worthy of you. A life, a legacy, something that won't corrode everything it touches. You see the best in me even when I don't deserve it, and you challenge me when I need it most." He lifted the ring from its box. "I'm not asking you to give up anything. Your work with the foundation, your studies, your independence, all of it stays. I'm asking you to build something with me. A real partnership based on choice and respect, and this absolutely terrifying love I feel for you." "Yes," I whispered, then louder. "Yes, of course, yes." Nicholas slid the ring onto my finger, the fit perfect, and stood to pull me into his arms. Our kiss tasted like salt and wine, and the future we were choosing together. Around us, the other diners noticed and began to applaud, but I barely heard them through the rushing in my ears. "I love you," I said against his mouth. "I've loved you for months, but I was too scared to say it. I love you too. So much it terrifies me sometimes." He rested his forehead against mine. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, Gabriella. The absolute best." We stayed in Italy for a week, exploring the Amalfi Coast and Rome, introducing me to the country my grandmother had carried in her heart all those years in America. Nicholas was different here, more relaxed, laughing more freely, as if distance from his New York responsibilities allowed him to simply be. The wedding happened 3 months later, on a crisp November afternoon at the DeLuca family property upstate. Not the Manhattan penthouse, but the estate where Nicholas's father had been raised, where his grandmother had tended gardens and taught him to value family over empire. We kept it small. Tyler, recovered and thriving, stood beside me as I prepared in the main house's bedroom, his teenage awkwardness transformed into genuine joy. "You look beautiful, Gabs," he said, studying my reflection. Like really beautiful. Not just brother duty beautiful. I laughed, smoothing down the champagne silk of my dress. It was simple, with clean lines, and a fitted bodice that flowed into a floor-length skirt. No train, no excessive detail, just elegant simplicity that felt true to who I was. "You clean up pretty well yourself." Tyler wore a suit Nicholas had helped him select, looking far more mature than his 18 years. "This is crazy, right? A year and a half ago, I was in the hospital thinking I might not make it. Now I'm walking my sister down the aisle at some estate that probably has its own zip code." He shook his head. "Nicholas is good people, though. Takes care of his own." "He is," I agreed. "And you're his own now, too. Family." The ceremony happened in the garden, under an arbor wrapped in late-season flowers. 40 guests, mostly Nicholas's trusted associates and their families, plus Tyler and Nicholas's mother Maria, who'd flown in from Arizona for the occasion. Maria DeLuca was elegant and weathered, with her son's brown eyes and a smile that held decades of complicated emotions. She'd pulled me aside that morning, taking my hands in hers. "My son has never looked at anyone the way he looks at you," she'd said. "Like you're his anchor and his wings all at once. Thank you for loving him despite everything he comes from. Thank you for creating him. I'd replied. Despite everything. Now I walked toward Nicholas on Tyler's arm, my brother giving me away with pride evident in every step. Nicholas stood under the arbor in a perfectly tailored black suit, his expression open and vulnerable in a way few people ever got to see. The vows we'd written ourselves were simple. Promises to choose each other, to build together, to be honest even when it was difficult. No grandiose declarations, just truth spoken plainly before people who mattered. When the officiant pronounced us married, Nicholas kissed me with thorough intensity, and I heard Tyler whistle from where he stood nearby, making everyone laugh. The reception was dinner and dancing under string lights as the sun set, intimate and warm. Maria danced with her son, tears streaming down her face, making peace with the life he'd chosen even if she couldn't be part of it daily. Tyler charmed several of the matriarchs who'd approved of me at the charity gala, his natural intelligence and humor winning them over. Late in the evening, Nicholas and I escaped to walk through the gardens, needing a moment alone. Happy? He asked, his arm around my waist. Completely. I leaned into him, the sapphire engagement ring now paired with a simple wedding band. This was perfect. Exactly what I wanted. Good. Because you're stuck with me now, Mrs. DeLuca. I can live with that, Mr. DeLuca. 2 years later, I stood in the Foundation's office reviewing quarterly financial reports, my accounting degree finally complete and put to immediate use. The volunteer program at Brooklyn Methodist had expanded to 3 other hospitals, helping hundreds of families navigate the nightmare of medical billing. Tyler was in his 2nd year at Columbia studying architecture, his drawings now professional quality, his dreams taking concrete shape. Nicholas had kept his promise about restructuring the business. It had been slow, methodical work, but legitimate operations now generated 60% of the income, with plans to increase that to 80% within 2 years. Some families had resisted the changes, but Nicholas's reputation and strategic alliances had held. The late afternoon sun slanted through my office window as I felt the familiar flutter in my abdomen, stronger now than it had been weeks ago. 7 months pregnant, and our daughter seemed determined to make her presence known constantly. Easy there, I murmured, rubbing the spot where a foot or elbow protruded. Mama's trying to work. She's already taking after you, Nicholas said from the doorway, a smile in his voice. Stubborn and making demands. I turned in my chair, taking in the sight of my husband. His hair was slightly longer now, threads of gray beginning at his temples, stress lines around his eyes from the weight he carried. But when he looked at me, at us, those lines smoothed into genuine contentment. How was the meeting? I asked as he crossed to me, his hand immediately going to my belly. Productive. We closed the real estate deal in Brooklyn, going to build affordable housing with ground-floor commercial space for local businesses. He knelt beside my chair, speaking to my stomach. Your mama helped structure the financing so it'll actually work long-term. She's brilliant, your mama. Stop talking to my belly. It's weird. She needs to hear her father's voice. All the books say so. His hand moved in gentle circles. I was thinking about reading to her tonight. Maybe some architecture history for Tyler's sake. I ran my fingers through his hair, overcome with love for this man who'd transformed from dangerous Mafia boss to partner to father-to-be with such genuine commitment. I never thanked you, Nicholas said quietly, looking up at me. For what? For answering that phone call in Italian. For being exactly who you are in that moment when Roberto was watching. For letting me claim you, even though I had no right. His hand stilled on my belly. That impulsive statement started everything. Exposed something I hadn't admitted to myself. And led to this. He gestured around us, encompassing not just the office, but everything we'd built. The foundation helping thousands. Tyler thriving. Our daughter growing strong. A life constructed on choice and respect rather than obligation and fear. You would have found your way to me eventually, I said softly. Some things are inevitable. Maybe, but I'm grateful it happened how it did. That I got to see you. Really see you. Before I understood what I was seeing. He stood, pulling me carefully to my feet and into his arms. I love you, Gabriella DeLuca. More than I knew it was possible to love anyone. I love you too. I kissed him gently. Now let's go home. I want to put my feet up. And you promised to make that pasta your mother's recipe. We left the foundation office together. my hand in his. Our daughter moving between us, the future uncertain but faced together. Whatever came next, whatever challenges the world presented, we'd handle it the way we'd handled everything else. Tyler had been part of every step that led us here. After long conversations with his adoptive parents and the social worker who had once suggested my best option was to let him go, we stopped talking about winning him back and started talking about what gave him the most stability. On paper, he stayed with the family that had raised him. In practice, he had 2 homes, 2 sets of parents, and more people fighting in his corner than either of us could have imagined when I was counting every pill at a plastic kitchen table. As partners, as family, as 2 people who'd found each other against impossible odds and chosen, every single day, to keep choosing each other.